Well, political science as a discipline has always had the perspective that we're not going to get hung up on any one method, and that we're going to use whatever method is appropriate to the kinds of questions we ask. And you'll see this in the boxes throughout the book. Some of them use quantitative analysis, which is basically statistical work on data, survey data or data about some phenomena. There are other political scientists who base their research on experiments, where we try and recreate a substantive situation in the lab and see how people react inside it. Others do case studies, where they focus on one event and try to understand why things happen in that event. And finally, there are people whose work is more normative and who ask not just what happened, but what would be the good thing to happen? What are the advantages and disadvantages based on some normative rules about a particular outcome?
So when political scientists try to get at that messy world of politics, there are different approaches they use to try to test their ideas and test their theories. One of the most common would be a statistical analysis of large data sets. And this kind of approach is useful when you have readily available information on a large number of actors. So if you're studying electoral behavior or say roll call voting in Congress, where you have 435 people in the House and 100 people in the Senate, and there are thousands of roll call votes over a period of Congresses, you have a lot of data you can use to then try to systematically explain what is causing what. So is it political parties that are influencing behavior? Is it more the interests of the constituents in the district that's explaining behavior? We can get measures for all of those different factors that try to influence what members of Congress are doing and control for those and try to then come up with an explanation for what really is driving a congressional outcome. So when you have large numbers of things that you're observing, a statistical approach can make sense. But there are other cases where you may not be able to have the information in large quantities. And there, if you're especially trying to explain some specific historical event, or maybe studying the presidency where you only have one president at a time rather than large numbers, and it's what in political science we call the small n problem. We don't have enough cases to study with large data sets. Then a case study approach is often more useful, where there you'd be using more historical archival research, looking at the memos the president wrote, and the advisors telling the president what to do. If it's a contemporary topic, you could then use interviews where you'd actually interview the actors and ask them about the motivations of the people who are involved in a given decision. And you can still systematically test different ideas, but you're doing it through a different method, through an in-depth case study. Case studies also can be useful for trying to get at a causal mechanism. So what is it that really is driving the motivations of the people? And in some cases, just talking to them, interviewing them can help you understand that causal process in a way that maybe couldn't be uncovered by a correlational analysis of using different larger data sets. And so case studies can be a useful complement to a statistical analysis in that way as well. But a third approach also then are experimental approaches, where what political science is trying to do in almost every instance is to explain something. And so to explain something, you have to control for other explanations. Well, in a statistical approach, you do that through statistics, that you get a variable, you measure it, you put it into a statistical model, and that way you can control for that alternative explanation. Well, a better way when you can do it, because you can really control for other explanations, would be an experimental approach, where you are in a lab and you can control the outside world by holding it outside your experiment, and then you can you can change the experimental thing you're interested in and have one group exposed to that stimulus and the other group not, and you can see if it has an effect. And so it gives you a much more controlled environment to see if your theory is working out the way that you think it will. And so that can be useful in some contexts as well. And then finally, there's some bigger picture questions, big normative questions of right and wrong, good and bad, that really are best investigated perhaps through just normative theoretical approaches that ask these questions that have been asked since the time of the ancient Greeks of, what is the proper role of government? How are interests best represented in the political system? What is an equitable or just distribution of wealth and resources in a society? What about sort of income inequality and growth? How are those affecting the political system? So those are all questions that are often at least partly best investigated through these normative approaches to studying politics.